and welcome to InFUZEd, our monthly marketing meetup, our virtual meetup. Appreciate you spending some time on this Thanksgiving week. We know it's a holiday week and everybody's got a lot to do, so taking time is much, much appreciated. For anyone new to this meetup, we had our first one last month. Each month we'll have a different marketing topic and we'll have a guest speaker for a short introduction. And then we'll break off to different tables to talk about marketing challenges and do some networking. We'll have topic tables moderated either by a FuzeHub expert or partner. And when you first came into the meeting this morning, you may have noticed the table names before we got started. Each of the tables has a different FuzeHub expert. Today we have a website table that will be me. I can help you answer websites. We have our featured speaker is always going to be in the upper left-hand corner. So you're going to be able to talk to John after his presentation today to go visit him, or Paul is at the table next to him to go visit and speak to him. We have a software table that's moderated by marketing software table that's moderated by Brent Pickard. We have usually we have an email marketing table, but today we don't. But if you do have questions about email marketing, then I'm more than happy to answer those questions. We also have the Innovation Fund here today table that'll be hosted by Patty Reckberger, who is in the, who manages the Innovation Fund for FuzeHub. And we also have Eric Fasser, who is head of our solutions program, and he'll be at a table today. If I forgot anyone, you'll see those tables there. Please sit down and talk to anyone there. But today I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have John Makowiak. He's the Vice President of Public Relations for the Martin Group. And his experience has helped manufacturers plan and implement strategic PR solutions for clients like the Frontier Communications, America's Best Communities Competition, and M&T Bank. Our other speaker is Paul Hook. Paul Hook is with FuzeHub, and he has led business development and marketing efforts for 4 regional agencies, playing an integral role in growing internal teams and ensuring client retention. Throughout his more than 30-year career, Paul has worked with some of the state's top technology, economic development, and higher education organizations. I'd like to welcome both John and Paul to the stage to talk about funding for manufacturers through these initiatives. Not funding, I'm sorry, talk about PR and media through these initiatives. I was just thinking we should invite George and Ringo to the stage, because then we'd have the whole band and we could change the whole vibe of this whole thing.
It'd be a very different sort of session if we did have George and Ringo with us, but maybe next time. But yeah, thanks, Kim, and appreciate clarification. Happy to talk about public relations. If you're looking for insights on funding, I might not be the best person to talk
That's
to,
right.
but I'm going to kick it off by sharing a screen with just a few slides that we had prepared to kind of guide the conversation at the start of the day. We're going to try to keep it brief so that we have plenty of time for conversation after we get through the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. You should be seeing a PDF right in front of you that says PR for media and manufacturers. And so just to kind of kick things off here, I think the important thing with public relations for manufacturers is that it's all about building credibility and authority for your company, for your brand, the work that you do. And so there's a few key things that earned media coverage can do for you if you go on and try to pursue it. And by earned media, we mean things like media coverage, press coverage, social media sharing, online reviews, that sort of thing. But with that type of earned media coverage, it does a couple of key things for you. First, it provides a third-party endorsement. It's not you saying that my company is great. It's somebody else saying that this company is one that you should be aware of them or some of the work that they do. It also demonstrates and reinforces your expertise and your value as a reliable resource, as a credible resource. It also is a great tool to be able to reach and engage your audience in spaces where they already are. Your targets are likely reading trade publications. You're maybe reading the regional business journal. If you can put your news in those spaces, it helps them drive some of that awareness building that you'll be seeking with some of those targets. There's also a positive impact for your search engine optimization. When people receive that outreach from your company in maybe a sales context, they'll likely search your company's name on Google. And by having some news clips that pop up alongside of your name there, that's going to help demonstrate that you are an authoritative source in your space. And then the other important thing is that when you go about proactively trying to build earned media coverage and generating coverage and building some relationships with journalists, it helps to mitigate against reputational damage that could result if a potential crisis situation hits your company. So if you do that work in advance to build a positive perception within the community, have some of those relationships in hand, that is going to help shape your perception as a company rather than that crisis that could arise and it could generate some media attention, rather than letting that crisis or negative situation paint somebody's perception of your company. Get out ahead of it, build those relationships, and start to connect with journalists by sharing your company's story. So that's kind of a quick insight on why you should why you should pursue public relations programs and try to generate earned media coverage. But here's a little bit about how you do it. And from my perspective, as somebody who kind of does it every day for companies across the state, it's all about doing the work of growing and investing in your company, and then sharing that experience with the media. Sometimes you need to get creative and do things that are publicity oriented stunts, but more so it's just doing the work that you're doing every day and letting people know about how it is that you're being successful and what it is are those kind of driving forces behind the great things that your company is doing. And it's done in a few different ways. The most traditional way is through a news release that looks very similar to a news article, but that just kind of lays out the story or the announcement that you're trying to make. Maybe includes a quote from your CEO or somebody who is the product manager of a new product you're releasing. It can be a little bit more informal with a story pitch, which mostly takes the form of maybe an email or a phone call to a journalist where you might reach out to just let them know about something happening within your company that you think might be interesting for them to cover. Beyond just things happening within your company, it could be something happening within your industry where maybe you make an observation about some trend happening in your industry and you know that you could comment on that issue. That might be another reason to reach out with a story pitch to a journalist. The other piece of it is just doing that relationship building with journalists. So beyond that kind of proactive outreach where you're trying to convince someone to tell a story, be a good consumer of media. And what I mean by that is if you are reading content in your regional business journal or within your industry's top trade publications, and there's some value in that story that you extract from their writing, let that journalist know about it. Send them a quick email that said, "Hey, great story. Really appreciated your work on it. One of the takeaways that you shared, I'm actually starting to apply it to my business," or maybe it's more of an outreach along the lines of, "Hey, really enjoyed that story you wrote. Have you ever considered the topic from this perspective?" And by doing some of that outreach that's a little bit more organic, that might help. That will help position you as a credible source to that journalist. But at the same time, it will potentially prompt coverage opportunities if you shed some light on an issue that, or shed some perspective on an issue that a journalist had not yet considered. And the other big thing about how do you do this sort of earned media program, you have to make sure that your workforce understands who you are, the messages that you're trying to amplify, and your objective as a company. They need to know how their work contributes to the business outcomes, because when your people are out at networking events, whether it's a conference for your industry or a regional business event, you want them to be able to speak about your company and what it does, because those are also earned opportunities where you're getting out there and you're telling people about the company, and it could prompt some chatter in social media spaces or that kind of word of mouth message sharing that can be really powerful for companies. Last thing about, and this is kind of another one of those why statements, by doing that work of building credibility and establishing authority for your brand, that is going to contribute to your sales as well as talent attraction. So when people receive that outreach from you for a product you're trying to sell them, they're going to Google you. When a potential candidate sees a position posted online, they're going to Google you. They're going to want to know what you're all about. And if they see news about your company in media sources that they trust and rely on, then they're going to see you as a credible company that they should be considering working for or working with as a customer. Really quickly, I want to go through just kind of the two different pools of media that regional manufacturers tend to swim in. The first is regional media, and then I'm going to dive really quickly into trade media. It's tough to get into specifics because everybody in this call is maybe working in different regions of the state. They're operating in different industries. So rather than going really deep in either one of these spaces, just kind of a general overview. With regional media, there's absolutely a value in that because it's going to show your impact in the market that you serve. But there's also, like I mentioned earlier, that SEO impact by having your news in a credible resource. So understand your regional media landscape, know what the regional business journal is and who works at it, know who's writing business stories for the regional newspaper in your market, but also have a sense of some of those hyper-local outlets that maybe cover a specific town within your region. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that many manufacturers work in very visually engaging environments. My industry in public relations and advertising, it's not visually interesting to show video of people working in front of a computer. Like, we create visual work, but the actual things that we do in the office, not visual whatsoever. However, because manufacturing can be such an interesting environment to capture footage of, that can create opportunities for manufacturers to kind of be the setting of stories about the regional economy. So there's also value in building relationships with those local broadcast outlets, even though you might not at the onset see the immediate value that might seem innate by generating coverage in your regional business journal. This is just underneath here, the news that they're interested in. Just a couple of things to be thinking about when you're deciding if you've got something worth telling your regional media about. If you have plans to hire 10 people over the course of a quarter or over the course of a year, or you need to hire 10 people, whether you get there or not, maybe is a different story with the current labor challenges that everybody's dealing with. That could be a headline that you might pitch over to the regional media in your market. If you're building out your local operations, if you're upgrading your workplace, if you're involved in the community or you're engaging in some sort of charitable activity, those are things to reach out to your regional media about. The other thing is maybe less about specific news at your company, but maybe it's insights that you have into your regional market. So you know that there's this thing happening within several regional businesses, whether it's in the manufacturing sector or maybe it's within the verticals that you serve. Let regional media know about that because that might prompt them to dig into a subject where they can position you as the expert source in that subject. The other important one is opinion essays or op-eds on topics that are regionally important. I've mentioned the labor challenges a few times already. If you have, if you decide that in your region you want to position yourself as somebody who's working to address the situation, maybe you have a really effective solution where you want to call for regional players to come together to address the problem, that might be an opportunity to reach out to the media to share what you think on that subject. And then quickly about trade media, what you should try to do is not just know the media outlets that are covering your industry, but also those media outlets that are covering the verticals you serve. So if you're a food manufacturer, it might not be a huge challenge to get coverage from Food Processing Magazine, and it's also hugely valuable to get that trade coverage. But there is also a ton of value in generating coverage opportunities in, media outlets that cover the supermarket industry or that cover the restaurant industry. Those types of companies that you could supply them with product. The types of news that trade media outlets are interested in. If you land a new customer that has a great story, that's a reason to reach out. If you have a new product that you want to announce, what I challenge you to think about is not so much about the product itself, but try to tell that story from the challenge that your product is solving. Because if you can tell that story in that way, where there's this big problem, here's why it's affecting a lot of companies in our industry, and here's the solution that we've developed to fix the problem, that's more likely to generate coverage than if you just issue a news release that says we've now launched version 3.0 of this product that we've had on the market. Always try to think about the challenge that you're trying to solve, and that's more likely to generate news coverage in the trade industry publication. C-suite hires, M&A activity, similar to regional market insights. If you have industry trends that you want to share. And then finally, thought leadership essay. So if you have some insights that you think could help drive the success of some of your peers or some of the types of companies that you support, that's another reason to reach out to your local media, your trade media. Paid media versus earned media. I think the important thing to keep in mind are the places where paid and earned media kind of come together, right? So if you do only earned media, if you focus only on paid advertising, those things alone may not do everything that you need them to do individually to establish credibility for your brand. But when you're doing a paid advertising program and you're complementing it with earned media activities, then you've also built out maybe a social media program and you're doing a little bit of owned media on your own website. You're writing blogs or maybe sharing video tutorials about your product. When you're doing all those different pieces of work together, that can really help establish your authority quicker than if you were focusing on any one specific area of marketing, whether it's paid media, earned media, social, or just building out your website. You need to have these different mechanisms working together so that combined, they can drive the success of your brand and building that credibility and establishing authority. Jumping really quickly, this I put together as just almost like a quick starter kit if you're not already familiar with some of your regional business contacts. The reporters and their contact information, which I just pulled from their websites, it's all very much publicly available. These are some of the key folks that you would want to be reaching out to at your regional business journals. These are folks who cover technology or manufacturing or just editors at the publication and can help connect you with a reporter who might be interested in telling your story. But these are all some of the key contacts that you would want to be reaching out to or be aware of for potential coverage opportunities down the line. And if you aren't able to get a chance to jot those down before I flip to this next slide here, my contact information is at the bottom of this slide. Definitely feel free to reach out to me if we don't have a chance to talk during the networking portion of today's event. Absolutely feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Would be happy to talk through any questions that you might have. On this slide here is just a few pieces of background about my company, the Martin Group. We're an integrated communications and marketing firm with offices across New York State. We listed out some of our areas of expertise on this slide. And then really what we try to do, we use brand intelligence to define and execute marketing strategy. And we strive to change the way people think. There's also a link to our website on this page as well if you wanted to check out some background about us. And with that, I want to kind of bring in my friend Paul, Fusa marketing manager. I listed his contact information on this screen as well, just because he's another outstanding resource who you should absolutely reach out to if you have questions about really anything marketing related. This guy's an expert through and through. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment and just take it back to just Paul and I, and just for a quick conversation before we open it up to the full floor to have some more organic conversations on the networking floor.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, there were only a couple things I was going to talk about it, just maybe a little bit prime the pump in one regard, but also maybe touch on some of the things that manufacturers might be thinking about, or what story do I present? Now you covered what's newsworthy in both regional and in trade publications. I guess some of the age where I can use the term back in the day and it actually means something, but I remember back in the day, new web launches were newsworthy. Things like that are just so commonplace and they're not. So I know you covered and we'll get slide access to everybody. I know that's been a question so they can refer to some of those so nobody's taking crazy notes here. But the other thing I did want to talk and more of my experience has been at agencies, full service agencies that have a client or a prospect come to us and they have a challenge, and PR is one of the solutions, but there can often be one of the solutions. But one of the other things that comes with it too is, and then we talked about this a little bit before when we were prepping for this, is life beyond the press hit. So how can we take advantage of, say you get some coverage, hopefully you get a lot of coverage, or you get a few different channels that are covering something, it can be especially these days of information overload. A lot of things are coming at us. It can be a real big success, and then in a half an hour it's gone, or the next day it's forgotten. So how can these manufacturers take advantage of that and use that in other avenues so that they extend that life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's something that we talk to a lot of our clients about, because uh, the the hit in your regional business journal, or the hit in your the trade publication you're targeting, that shouldn't really be the end of the effort. That should really almost be the beginning of it. You put in the work to generate that coverage. Now you need to find ways to maximize its reach, and that can be done in a number of ways. So first, the easiest things to do are to share a link to that story on your social media channels. If you're not active in a social media space, but you have an email list of customers and prospects, you would want to email a link out to the story to them, encourage them to not just watch the story, but if they're a trusted customer, maybe ask them to share it on their channels as well, and maybe share a little bit about their positive experience working with your company. And also, if you have a workforce that's really tech savvy and is active in social media, ask them to be sharing it on their social media pages as well, because that can be a really effective tool to just expand the reach. Because so many of the different algorithms that we're working against in the social media space, if a company shares shares a post, it's not always the easiest thing to ensure that that company's post is going to reach its intended audiences. However, if your content is not just being shared by your brand, but also the individual associates within your company, that can then help expand the reach, because now that content is being shared on a peer-to-peer basis as opposed to a company to potential consumer basis. And then also use those media hits to kind of continue to further build your credibility as an organization. So if you landed a really nice hit from the Albany Business Review, and then you also see that coming down the line, they have some event coming up that's going to touch on issues related to your industry sector, that might be an opportunity to reach out and say, hey, we saw this event coming up. You guys covered me in the past about a similar topic. Would you be open to having me being on that panel? Similar sorts of things with industry events, or just other events within the regional business community, where if there's a topic that you were covered on, try to find ways to use that news link as a way to do more outreach about the types of services you provide, or the type of expertise that you can lend in some sort of setting that's going to continue to help lift the brand recognition, as well as maybe some positive perception with your brand.
Yeah, and it also seems like a simple thing, but just to remind people to tag whatever other businesses, organizations, and so on might be part of that story, because then that helps get to their audience, including the reporter and the journalist, because sometimes that's not even thought about, but you want to remind them, oh, hey, look who's seeing this, so they get to see it out there, and then they plants that in their head. As you just said, the next time there's an opportunity in that industry or in that specific part of the industry, that they remember you as a source of someone that they can hopefully call back to get a quote, maybe be on a panel, et cetera, everything that you're saying. So this is all planting the seeds and laying the foundation for more of this to happen later. That's beyond just getting more coverage out of that one, but also to hopefully get more. So keep coming back to that, so that becomes part of your program organically, if it can grow that way. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of work that's involved in doing that. But if you just kind of like integrate it into the way that you operate online, and you share some of that content organically on your own, and it's just going to start to feel a little bit more natural. It'll feel a little bit less like you're doing something more. But the reality is that while it might seem like work to be doing all this extra sharing after you generate that media, that piece of media, it's also it's all exposure that you're generating without a direct cost, right? So if you can probably much more easily generate, place an ad, but it's going to cost you a lot more, because there's going to be that placement cost with that media outlet. But if you do some of this foundational work, as you described it, Paul, then you can start to find opportunities to reach out from that platform that you've built for yourself, to try to generate more opportunities for exposure.
Right. Yeah. So that was great start. And I know we want to make sure that people have a chance to either ask direct questions, because you'll have some specific things that may pertain to you that we might have covered more broadly, but also visit the other tables, different experts, if you have some specific things on web or SEO, et cetera. So I'll pass the mic back to Kim, the virtual mic, however we do this.
Great. Thanks, John and Paul. I hope your band gets back together. So your guidance is much appreciated. I think that media and PR is such a mystery for a lot of manufacturers that please take advantage of going to talk to them about what's going on at your specific company to get some insight to help you immediately right after this session's over. So I forgot to mention a couple of additional tables. We have content and SEO with Steve Melito. That's another table. And then Kurt Anderson, he's a FuzeHub partner. He'll be at the e-commerce table. So e-commerce for manufacturers. So to keep the conversations going at any time throughout the rest of the session, feel free to ask the audience. We want you guys to network with each other. You are all working in the manufacturing world, trying to do very similar things. So feel free to each other. That's why we have networking tables that you can meet up at and talk to each other. You can ask your question in the chat to see if there's anybody in the conference that is running into the same thing that you're running into. So feel free to use the group chat. When we're done today, we do want to offer a free needs assessment to anyone who would like a follow-up to go a little bit in depth for scoping a potential marketing project that you think is top of mind for you. So feel free to find me at the website table or Steve Melito at the SEO table. Next month, December 13th, we'll be talking about video and podcasting. So that should be really interesting. So please feel free to join us on December 13th. And then shortly we'll be publishing our winter series for a monthly meetup. That should be coming in the next week or so. So please have a good networking. We really appreciate you showing up today. Thank you.